I've been a nurse for many years and I've gone to many facilities. And so there were quite a few experiences that I have encountered with the paranormal side of life. I'd like to tell you a story about the time that I worked at a facility in which I won't state the name for privacy reasons. This building that I worked at used to be the hospital for the area. But since the city had developed and people started moving towards the city, the hospital soon became vacant, in which a company bought it out and decided to turn the hospital into a nursing home. Now, the nursing home was located on the second floor of this building, and the smaller wing on the east side was transformed into a family practice clinic for those that live in that small town. I had been working the night shift and was assigned to pick up an extra shift that week. So as I came in to start my day, or actually to start my shift at night, I had this really eerie feeling that something was going to happen tonight. I couldn't quite shake that feeling. It was just one of those things where you knew in your gut that something could possibly have gone completely wrong, or maybe something wasn't going to be going well that night. I call it the nurse's intuition. It was about 2 o'clock in the morning when one of the call lights went on in my patient's room. He told me that he had heard banging on the window as if somebody was knocking on his window or throwing something at his window. Either way, we looked out the window and there was nobody, and I reassured him calmly that it was not a possibility as we were on the second floor and that there was nobody that could potentially reach the windows up that high unless they had a ladder. In that case, we would have seen them try to haul away that ladder. And so the man joked, and I could joke with him because that was the type of person he was, and he was a real kind gentleman. So I wouldn't have thought anything of it. He and I, we laughed, we joked, and he brushed it off. About 5 minutes later, another patient rang and said that somebody was knocking on their window too. At this point, we as in the aides and I, kind of just joked about it still, and we didn't really take it seriously. We looked at the windows and checked the rooms, and there was nothing there, and reassured the patient, and once again the patient went back to bed. We were doing our rounds about half an hour later when one of the ladies who lived down the hall next to the nurse's station put her call light on. And when my aide went in there, I just looked at her and I said, oh, maybe she'll take care of it since she walked into that room. And I went back and sat down at the nurse's station to finish up some chartings that I had to do for Medicare. My nurse's aide came back and told me that the patient in that room had reported seeing a dog sitting at the foot of her bed. I was confused. I said, a dog? There is no dog here at this time of the night. And the facility had a security system in place at that time where they did not allow any visitors to walk through the doors at night without ringing the doorbell. So the doors were basically locked at night, and it was my job when I first come on to check the doors and make sure that they lock at 11 o'clock and that all the entrances to the unit was monitored and accounted for. And I did that, and I didn't recall anyone coming up or calling me or buzzing in. So I asked the other aide if she had let any visitors come up at that time of the night, and she had said no. I walked around the unit just to make sure that we didn't have any strange people trying to get in or have anyone leave their dog without us noticing. Obviously, we would have noticed that, but anyhow, we were looking around and there was no signs of a dog or a pet. And now this lady's room, her room was all the way at the end of the hall to the right. And suddenly, on the opposite end of the hall, one of the men put his call light on. And when we went in there, he also said the same thing, that there was a black dog sitting on the foot of his bed. Once again, we reassured him and told him that perhaps he was we reassured him that perhaps it was a dream, or we reassure him that everything was okay, and for him not to worry, that we will keep looking around to make sure that there is no animal or pets up here at that time of the night. Now, the strange thing was this occurred several times again after that, particularly within a few minutes of each other, which was very strange. And at that point, the hallway in the unit had become very cold. Now, granted, it was summertime, and so we figured the air conditioner was on. We didn't think much of it. I was sitting back at the nurse's station when I noticed on the monitor that the motion sensor had gone off. So I looked at the security camera screen that we had in our office. Now, the security cameras are located down the halls at several points. So if you were to follow the screen on the TV where the security image was, you could see and track movements that will be coming down the hall and where and at what point of the hallway they were at, or at that unit they were at. So I'm watching this monitor and the motion sensors are going off, and it's only on one area of the hallway. I said, oh, well, perhaps it was a malfunction or a technological error, or maybe it was a glitch in the system. I looked down the hallway, and obviously there's no one there. It's a dead-end hallway. There's no entrance except for a fire escape door, but if that door were to have been opened, the alarms would have gone off. So I went back to doing my work and getting my documents all ready for the day. Then the security camera went off again. The motion sensor got tripped. And once again, I looked down the hallway and there was nothing there. I was thinking, what the heck is going on? My aides, they came and I had asked them if anybody was down the hall triggering the motion sensor. They both said no, they were on the opposite side. So I proceeded to explain to them that the motion sensors were going off, and at that very moment it went off again, and I showed them, and they were surprised as all three of us were looking down the hall and we didn't see anything. Then the one security camera next to it triggered. So at this point, all three of us were staring at this screen, and we could track where the motion is coming based on the security camera, and whatever it was walking towards us or moving towards us. Now, about halfway down the hallway, the motion triggers had stopped indicating that there was any motion, and all I could hear was a very faint sound of a walker, and the sound of the walker came closer and closer to us, and my first instinct was, oh boy, I think one of my patients had gotten up to use the walker. Now, a little backstory. The unit that I was taking care of, we did not have any patients that were able to get up and walk around by themselves. They were all wheelchair bound or needed assistance. And so I was very confused as to why the sound of a walker was coming down the hallway. And I thought to myself, oh, I don't believe in ghosts. This couldn't be one of those like horror movie scenes where you hear the walker and then the bells and something creepy pops up. So I joked and I brushed it off, and I went down to the hallway and I looked, and sure enough, there was nobody there. We did a quick round and all of our patients were in their bed and nobody was up. All the walkers and wheelchairs were accounted for, and we came back and sat down. And the security camera did the same thing again. Now this time we could see what looked like a very faint shadow on the security camera screen, and it was coming down the hall again, and it was triggering the motion sensors on the security camera. So at this, I'm looking at the screen, I'm looking at my aides, and my aides are looking a little bit more nervous than they were a few minutes ago. And that shadow thing on the screen gets to about the camera right before it hits the nurse's station. That's when I heard the sound of an IV pole being pulled. I know for sure that I don't have any patients that night that were on IVs. And so I'm listening to this IV pole being strung along the hallway. Now, if you ever worked in a hospital, medical setting, or had dealt with any sort of IV therapy, you would recognize the sound of the IV pole on its wheel, and also the sound of the IV pump, the alarms. And so I recognized that sound. I'm thinking, did someone pull out an IV pole from storage? I'm sure they didn't. There's no way, because I'm the only one with the keys to go down there right now at this time of the night. So my aides, they both cuddle a little bit closer to the nurse's station. So the nurse's station was designed to be kind of like a corner station, and it had walls on the sides of it. So there was an opening for a window where visitors and guests and staff members can peek in and talk to the nurses, and obviously there was a door off to the side. And so my aides were on the opposite side of the window. I call it window, but there's actually no glass there of that opening, and they were talking to me from the other side of the nurse's station. So I look, and my aides, they both start to huddle closer, and one of them looks very nervous. And I ask her, I said, what's going on? And she says, I'm hearing bells. I said, bells? She goes, yeah, just a very faint sound of a bell, like as if someone had like a little bell and they were ringing it. So we both listened, and all three of us actually listened, and sure enough, there was a sound of a little bell along with the sound of an IV pole. So one of my aides says, you know, I'm gonna come into the nurse's station. She starts walking around the counter and comes into the nurse's station, sits next to me. The other aide said, you know, that we were both paranoid and that she would just stand there on the counter. At this point, all the sound that we had just heard a minute ago had stopped. And she said, see, there's nothing to it. And I kid you not, the very second she said that, it sounded like the IV pump alarm went off right around the corner of my nursing station. And I could see on the security camera that it was just us. There was no one else there. I think the look on my face gave it away, because the aide that was looking at me, her mouth was wide open. She was just scared, and I don't know what she saw, but she was so scared. So I looked at the other aide who was on the other side, still talking through the window opening with me, and she says, I feel a cold chill right here. And the moment she said that, we heard this voice from behind her grumble, and it was a very deep, manly grumble. We couldn't explain what it said. All I know was that, and within a split second, my aide ran across to get inside the nursing station, and some force knocked over the patient charts on the wall inside my nursing station. So I had 3 rows of charts on the wall, and the whole top row, one by one, just fell down, and the binders opened up, and the patient charts were everywhere. My aides are screaming, I'm screaming, And whatever that thing was, it knocked over the pen holder that was right at the counter, and pens were everywhere, and my patient charts had broken. The binding of it had opened up, so all the papers were everywhere. We were afraid. We weren't sure what it was that we had just experienced. All of us was in shock. We all sat and huddled in the corner for a few minutes, trying to gather our, bearings and get our senses back. Even to this day, none of us could figure out or quite explain what had happened that night. Obviously, I spent the next hour or two trying to put the charts back together and making sure that everything was organized in the right way. In the morning, I told my supervisor about it, and I said, if everybody could please help double check the charts and make sure that I didn't miss anything important. And luckily, I didn't. Everything was put back correctly. But the supervisor looked at me and didn't quite believe me when I told her what had happened, even though the other aides had attested to the situation and witnessed it themselves. Now, to this day, I have not stepped foot back in that nursing unit. I left the unit after my contract ended a couple weeks later, and I have not gone back since. I don't plan on going back to that place.